Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. I'm your host, Annalena, and I'm very delighted to have another amazing guest here with me today. His name is Taylor Stewart. And before I formally introduce you, I want to just give you a warm welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Annalena. Great to connect with you here. I've been a fan of your work online for I don't know 5 years now, and so it's wonderful that we're actually finally cleared our schedules to make time for this podcast. Looking
Yeah.
forward to the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I believe we connected several years ago over human design a little bit. And that's kind of, I have been
Yeah,
into human design 5 to 6 years now. So you kind of found me
yeah,
right when I got into it. Um,
uh-huh.
and you work with home. So let me read your bio and then we'll
Sure.
dive in a fascinating conversation. So Taylor is the licensed architect with over 25 years of experience, and his book, which I also have, called The Conscious Home Design, has hit the #1 bestseller list in 7 countries so far. And specializing in single and multi-family homes and intentional communities, he works with clients all over the United States and select places internationally. He also offers a certification program for other designers and architects to learn the conscious home design methods to help their clients apply the life-changing principles wherever they are. And I'm gonna obviously share all the links and websites later on. So I love this so much because we spend a lot of time at our homes, right? I think especially since COVID, obviously now that has been a little bit different. We go out more now again, but we spend a lot of time in our homes. So I would love to hear a little bit about your story. How did you get into this field and area?
Um, yeah, we definitely. I mean, we're spending. Average person spends more than half their life in their home. And for people that are working at home, it's 90% of their life is spent at the home.
Yeah, I work from
And
home. Yeah.
so,
Tell me about it.
that we all know about the mind body connection, but there's such a thing as the mind body environment connection too. I think we all understand that. But the way that works is even less understood than just the mind body connection is. And we know a lot about the mind body connection, but there's still so much more room for us to grow, in that field. But my work as an architect is to help people more fully understand and put that mind body environment connection to work for them in their favor. And so I got into it even from early childhood. I had a placemaking, sort of a maker's mindset. For me, play was setting up the the stage, whereas a lot of my peers were playing with their action figures or their dolls, and they would have them have conversations and interact and go on little adventures together
Mhm.
and engage and do stuff. And I could play that way. It was fine. But what I really liked to do was actually just create the house or create the landscape and put the pieces in place and set the stage. And then once
Mhm.
everything was perfectly set up, I could just sit back and just admire it, And for me, my work was done. It's like, okay, now your job is to live happily ever after. So that sense of that natural aptitude of placemaking very much serves an architect's profession because that's what I do. So I didn't know it at the time, even in my tween years, I remember sketching designs out on graph paper. I was always drawing houses and building forts in the backyard and stuff. And the adults in my life always suggested, hey, why don't you be a carpenter or why don't you be an artist? You're so good at drawing, but no one ever said the word architect for
Mhm.
some reason. So it wasn't until I was in my mid 20s, and I had already built and sold my first company and was going, what next? What am I going to do? That suddenly the light bulb went off. I was like, oh, of course, I'm going to be an architect. So,
Mhm.
at 25 years old, I went back to school to study to become a licensed professional. And so here I am. So that's a little
Yeah.
about my personal sort of interest in it. But in terms of, because not all architects are created equally. We're all individuals, and within the field of architecture, there's specialties you can practice and focus in on, just like attorneys or doctors. Architects also specialize. So the fact that I have this sort of mind body spirit interest and wanting the environment to serve and facilitate that really reflects my fundamental belief that architecture it is, if you look at it in a very narrow mindset, about buildings, because obviously the building has to stand up and it has to, you know, resist the changes of the weather and, and create a stable climate inside. And we have different styles and designs and um, ways we put the things together. But for me, architecture is it's really about people first. It's less about buildings, ultimately it's about people, in the same way that a book is not about pages and ink. You know, a book is about the experience. It's about the story and the journey that a person is going to go through. Architecture is about the experience and the story that people um, are going to go through while they're there. And so, bricks and sticks is the medium, just like paper and ink is the medium for a
Mm.
book. And so that perspective of human first, is it skews my lens a little bit compared to a purist, who's a pure designer and stylist and says this is the form and we're
Yeah.
just supposed to fit into it. And so I'm really about who are you? And then once I understand your goals and your trajectory and the future that you want to build for yourself, because the ability to create your environment is the ability to manage your destiny and create your future. Because when we dedicate space to our activities, we give ourselves the chance for success in those activities. And so I want to understand you as an individual and say, where are you going? What makes you come alive? What feeds your spark? And then let's shape space around that. And of course, it will be in the style you want, whether you like a modern or a classic or rustic or anything else, we're obviously you're going to get that. But let's start with who you are. So that's conscious home design.
I love this so much because I work with human design, you work with home design. So there's also a little
Yeah.
bit, and what you just shared, because my approach with human design, there's a little bit of a connection here. So with this, that you want to talk to a person first and not just build the house, because so in human design, I think you know a little bit like the manifesting generator, these types and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And what I see often happening, which doesn't resonate with me at all, is that we put people into boxes. Oh, you're this
Mm-hmm.
is how you should feel, this is how you should behave, this is how you make decisions. And I have learned through my experience and working with hundreds of people that this is just an archetype, and we
Right.
cannot put like billions of people into five type boxes. It's just like the
Yeah.
opposite of freedom. And the way that
Mm.
I teach human design is very intuitive, where it's just like you, it's about the person. It's like, let me talk to you, let me listen to you. Where are you coming from? What are your goals? What are your dreams? And then I look at your chart and I extract a lot of things that are going to be very helpful for you, right?
Mhm.
Also showing you blind spots and things like this. And when you were just talking about the home, because yeah, we can build a home and it's going to be all pretty, like perfectly aesthetically and all of it, but if it doesn't fit who you are, and then we later find
Right.
out it's kind of backwards, right? It's like we waste a lot
Right.
of time, money, and energy onto something, and then it's like, oh, we should have maybe talked to the person first or the family as a
Exactly.
whole.
That's right. That's
It's
so right.
it's really like it's the art of listening, right? And
Hmm.
understanding that, yeah, we can have a house. And look, I live in South Florida and I love it here,
Yeah.
but I also have noticed over the years that there is so many houses that look exactly the same. It's very cookie cutter. I have never liked that. It feels very weird to me. It very
Yeah.
robotic, very
Hmm.
boring. There's not much variety. I mean, yeah, sometimes they
Hmm.
use a different
Hmm.
color, but it's always the same
Hmm.
layout and all of that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is why I also love so much what you do. So in human
Hmm.
design, we also have environment. It's just a very small part of it. And so some people,
Okay.
give you an example, they thrive when they are, it's called, for me, for example, mountain environment, right? Where I can tell you, I love being in nature. I love being on mountains. I love being
Sure.
like looking down. And I really don't like being in a cellar, like downstairs, or where there's no light
Yeah.
coming in. And other people
Hmm.
have something called cave, then they may like it more. They like a room to hide out. There are other people that
Yes.
have kitchen environment where it's more about being around people and where the party's going on or cooking is going on and things like that, right? So that's why I find this also so interesting because as a family, for example, we are going to be unique. You know, one person is more environment, other one is more like, I need my cave. Other people are going to be more like, no, I need like a busy space where there's a lot of things going on, and another one needs to really
Yes.
retreat. So I would love to hear from you how you approach, especially working with families.
Yeah. Okay. Super. You know, there's a lot I could learn from you, and there's a lot that, conscious home design and human design, I think play very well together.
Mm.
Like conscious home design is sometimes people ask, what is conscious home design? And it's like, is that feng shui? And I'm like, no, it's not feng shui, but it integrates just fine with feng shui principles. It's um, so anyway, working with the family, you talked about listening. You mentioned that listening is such a good quality, such an important quality, and it is. Listening is half the battle. The other half is asking good questions. Because if you ask good questions, you'll get hopefully good answers. The quality of your question will largely determine the quality of your results. And so if you're not asking the right questions, you may end up, going down the wrong path
True.
simply because you didn't read the map carefully, or look at it properly. And so conscious home design, the book, just backing up, I always knew I was going to write a book, even from my college days. I just didn't realize it was going to take me 20 years before I'd actually get it out the door. If you'd asked 25-year-old Taylor what my career trajectory was going to look like, I was like, I'll get it out of school and I'll work in the book, probably publish a book after about year 5, maybe year 10, but
Hmm.
no, as it turns out, it took me, it was year 20 before the book came out. But it just took me that long of experience and practice. And you can't force a snake to shed. It does it in its own time.
Yeah.
And so it just the natural unfolding of me coming up with aha. Now everything I've learned from 20 years of practice and experience is gelling, and I can now say, I can crystallize the methodology and say, there's lots of stuff out there, lots of beautiful shots on Pinterest and Instagram. You can get distracted by all these styles and things.
Hmm.
But what really moves the needle in terms of human happiness? And so just giving someone, beautiful shelter is not a guarantee of their fulfillment, that they're going to be, enriched, and they're going to be a well-rounded individual, and they're going to say, I feel satisfied with life, right? That's not enough. We have higher needs than that. And so I wrote the Conscious Home Design workbook to take the ideas of the book and and basically ask the right questions. What questions can we ask to make sure, we're tapping into a person's needs of creative expression, of loving connection, of personal growth and self-development?
Mm.
When was the last time an architect or designer asked someone, what do you like to do for creative expression? And then tried to incorporate space for that in the design of their home. It's these questions are rare. And so I actually partnered with someone who has a dual master's degree in social work and psychotherapy, and read the book, and then together we wrote these things, because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor. I'm interested in these things, and I want to draw from the knowledge that the other professions know about the science of human excellence. But I'm an architect, so I have to stay in my zone of expertise.
Yeah.
But so partnering with this person, we were able to write good questions that evoke the answers that I'm looking for. And then to your question specifically about the family, if one person, typically on any project, there's one person who's point, the point of communication, that I'll be working with. Someone has more time, someone has more interest, or it's just their natural style. But we don't want to end up having that person drive the design for the whole house,
Yeah.
because, for instance, you need to have a space that everyone feels comfortable in. For example, if the family room is your stated goal is place to connect with the people I live with, place to have quality time and interactions. But if the design style of the person driving the project ends up, now we've got a family room where all the walls are orange, and other people in the family are like, I hate orange, and no one wants to be there. You've defeated the purpose. The
Yeah.
highest goal is the relationships with your family.
I mean,
But
this
the
is almost like family therapy a little bit, right? Because we have to combine different styles, different opinions, different tastes, and find something that works for the unit in some way.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it therapy. I would call it discovery.
Mm.
I would call it finding out what people like what as an individual. And so I encourage the whole family to do the workbook. Even kids 5 years old, just sit, do it with their parents, and you can ask them some
Mhm.
questions. What do you think about this? And then write it down. And then I can look at everything. And part of the art of architecture is, blending, is finding what elements overlap and highlighting those and creating spaces that sort of balance the ticket. Like in a typical hetero uh, bedroom, a lady is not going to want to go to sleep in Castle Grayskull, and guys aren't going to want to go live in Barbie Cloud Palace. I mean, those are
Oh,
extreme examples, right?
yeah.
But you need to create a setting where both you're balancing a masculine and a feminine energy, but also design preferences. You talked about people that want cave versus ones who want, perch,
Mhm.
an overlook. What makes you feel safe? Some people want to burrow, and some people want to be able to survey things.
Mhm.
And so there's different desires and sort of fundamental needs that people have. And so my job is, the more I can understand what works for people, then I can help create space and balance space. And it's about harmony.
Yeah. And you do work with types of relationships, right? That are related to our
Oh
well-being.
yeah,
Can you explain? I think there's three types of relationships that
sure.
we experience. I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So when I wrote the book, Conscious Home Design, I was very clear that I didn't want to just publish another style guide. There are lots of talented designers out there who have their, unique spin on textures and colors and materials and making their collage. And they hang up their art, and they tell the whole world, hey, swipe left or swipe right. If you like me, hire me. If you don't, no problem. Move on. But that's not my approach. My approach is, conscious home design is universal. What's true for all human beings? So I look at
Mhm.
Maslow's The Hierarchy of Human Needs pyramid and say, what are fundamental truths that are true for everyone? And then once we do that, on top of that, then we start looking at the individual. And so we all have these needs for basic shelter, but love and belonging and connection with relationships and personal development, et cetera. And so as I was writing the book, I was looking for things that were more universal and more science based rather than aesthetic or opinion
Mhm.
influenced. And I came across the Harvard study of adult happiness, which was started in 1938. And it's still going on to this day. So here we are, 88 some odd years later. And they've studied thousands and thousands of individuals. They're on to multiple generations. They track them through their whole life. And they found that as people went through life and they experienced the ups and downs that come with being alive, whether they were, business success or failure, whether they had health challenges, whether they had a big fancy home with all the niceties, or whether they came from a very modest home, some of them even without running water, they found that while all of these things matter, the single biggest factor in people's happiness and actually their life expectancy, statistically, people live longer, is when they had quality relationships and connections in their life. And so I think that makes sense. We all know that intuitively. Oh, of course. That's why I get out of bed. Everything I do is for my family or for my
Mhm.
friends, and all my spare time. That's what I want to do is connect and hang out with the people that are close to me that I care about. But once you have the math, from the science, from the data that says, hey, if you do this, if you prioritize this, you'll actually statistically live longer. And not only will you live longer, but the years
Mhm.
you do have are going to be richer. Then it gives us permission to take family time, off of your um, wish list and put it on your must-have list. And so as an architect, when I realized the highest purpose of the built environment of the home is to help people live happily ever after, help people live their best life. And when Harvard comes and says, look, we studied thousands of people over decades, here's the facts. People live longer, happier lives when they have good relationships. I say, okay, well, how can I design a home specifically, intentionally to facilitate and encourage and support relationships?
Hmm.
And so relationship is a big word, just like happiness. It's like, what does that even mean? How is that a target that you can actually aim for? You know, it's so giant. So to break it down, I had to start diving into this concept of relationship. What does that even mean? And the Greeks, turns out they have like 7 different words for love, depending on if it's between a parent and a child, or between two best friends, or between a
Really?
person in their community, and all the different flavors, you know, eros, filial, agape, storge, et cetera, et cetera. And that's very interesting, you know, but I wanted to learn more because the Harvard study was very clear. They said, look, relationship is not limited to, you know, a romantic partnership. You know, you can be single and still live a long, happy life if, you know, if that is your desired lifestyle. um, so, you know, all the different relationships that you have, you know, contribute to this bouquet of beauty in your life. So for my purposes, to being able to qualify and be able to organize and structure, you know, because I'm a systems thinker as an architect, it's about, you know, the experience and being able to compartmentalize and understand. Someone said that knowledge is being able to make finer distinctions about a subject. So, for instance, you could say, hey, I know about geography. The earth is round, it's a big globe. Well, going deeper, within that globe, we have 7 continents, you know, and five oceans, you know. And so it's like, okay, so now you know a little bit more. You've made a finer distinction. It's not just an earth, you know, it's not just a ball, right? And so going further
Yeah.
within those continents, there's
Like
countries. So
going into the depth, right?
going and being able to make finer distinctions. So within these concepts of relationships, I needed to be able to make finer distinctions so that I could work with them more effectively and help people actually target desirable outcomes. What I found is that in all the myriad different ways that we interact, I realized that we come into what I've defined as 3 broad categories: giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships. So all of the relationships, you know, any pick a relationship that you have, it's going to fall into one of those categories. It's going to be primarily, you know, giving or receiving or reciprocal. The truth is that metaphysically, there's no such thing as a one-sided relationship. Every relationship you have, there's a give and take. There's an energetic exchange. That's the truth. But at face value, the first step on the outer form of it, it's going to look like, it's going to identify as one of these 3 categories. And so I'll share some examples. Examples of giving relationships are ones where we show up as the primary giver, and so these are relationships where perhaps that we are a coach or a mentor. Um, Perhaps we're a babysitter or teacher or parent to a young person. Um, Giving relationships would even extend to plants and animals, whether it's a pet or a bird feeder outside is an example of a giving relationship that you've initiated with an animal. And so giving relationships are important to us because they get us out of our little bubble, the little bubble of me. You know, instead of this echo chamber bouncing around and just worrying about yourself, they
Yeah,
expand your.
I love this. I just want to pause
Go
here for
ahead.
a
Yeah,
second
let's pause
because
here.
I came to this realization, and we are here to serve, right? And I think fulfillment and prosperity at the end of the day has to
In
do with
part,
being of
yes.
service. And I
Hmm.
had at some point this realization, if I'm constantly just thinking about myself, I'm gonna be miserable. If I
That's right.
focus on how, and this came through something, I was supporting my neighbor a lot, elderly lady that needed some support, and I
Yeah.
felt so happy. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, like just being able to support another person without needing anything in return, just because you can, because it's meant to
Hmm.
be.
Hmm.
I mean, that just came to me when you were talking because it's so, so true. When we are like, we're looking for fulfillment from these external things that we think we need. I need money. I need a relationship. I need this, right? But actually, it's like, give what you were given, like you're genius, share this, And that actually creates more happiness. So I can just really
It
attest to
certainly
that.
is a part of it. Yeah, we have an inherent fundamental need to give as well as receive. We
Yeah.
all being loved, we all need it. No one's an independent island. Oh, I don't need love. I don't need anybody. That's
Yeah.
that's a lie. We
Yeah.
need to be loved. But by the same token, we also need to be able to give love and express love and share it with
Yeah.
others in the many forms that it can come. With your neighbor, that's a beautiful example. Yes. So it helps us become a well-rounded individual. It's one of the aspects. So that's giving relationships. Reciprocal relationships, you and I, Annalena, have one right now. It's two people showing up in their own areas of and strengths and expertise, and we're just exchanging ideas and
Yeah.
talking about stuff. Relationships in the reciprocal um, level are going to be include friends, colleagues, co-workers, spouses, just people you hang out with. Anywhere where there's an equal exchange, there's a give and take. It's different than a giving relationship because I don't have to show up with a role model face on, like I would if I was parenting or I had to, be on the best behavior. In a reciprocal relationship, I'm able to let my hair down a little bit, and speak from the heart and be a little bit more naturally myself. And so there's a different quality, and that relationship also allows us to expand ourselves. And then receiving relationships are the ones where we show up as the primary recipient and beneficiary of someone else's care and wisdom and love and encouragement. And so relationships that we have with our mentors and coaches and teachers, or elders and ancestors, parents, even our heroes and spiritual figures, are sources of encouragement or wisdom or love. And these relationships, obviously, you can see why we need them. They shortcut our time to success. When someone can show us a better way, we don't have to make as many mistakes, hopefully. But also, we need that encouragement. We need to feel like someone has our back. We need to feel like someone wants the best for us, that we're not alone, and
Mm.
that someone says, "Hey, I care about you," and then that changes how you feel in your own skin. How you stand on your own 2 feet. And so having that awareness, hey, someone wants the best for me. That um, inspires confidence. And that confidence shows up in little ways, the ripples that go out, what comes back over time. And so when we can support all three of those relationships in the home, it's going to set up a positive feedback loop. Your home is going to send signals, it's going to mirror back to you. Oh, you know what? The things that matter to me are possible. My life works. It's working for me. And that's a very hopeful perspective to go through life with. Look, as we move through the phases of life, we're going to experience different ratios of the
Yeah.
giving, receiving, and reciprocal. When you're in college, you're going to be tons of receiving from the professors. And any spare time you have, you're going to be hanging out with your buds, with your friends. There's not a lot of giving relationships for most people at that phase of life, which is fine because shortly after, most people settle down, start a family, and then they've got young kids. It's giving 24/7 for years, right?
Mm.
So, there's going to be ebb and flow. But the point is, over the course of life, you want to have a healthy mix to be a well-rounded person and a happy and fulfilled person, according to the data. And so, what that looks like for each individual is unique. We have introverts and extroverts and different social customs and different, desires for engagement that people have. And so, but once we understand that there is this, framework of giving, receiving, and reciprocal, we can start to ask the questions. Hey, assess your own home. Look around. Do you have opportunities? Where are you well supported? Are there any gaps where you could be more supported? Can we make a shift? And you can start identifying sort of the low hanging fruit. Where are my opportunities to feel more um, enriched? And so that's how I came at that one. Is the giving, receiving, reciprocal is how we can actually work with this concept of relationship to truly benefit people's lives in a way that's tangible.
Yeah. I love this again because I'm gonna go back now to human design to also show you
Sure.
again there is some similarities, I think, in our approaches. because I was talking about these five types, and you also have these three relationship categories, right?
Hmm.
Because as I have been studying this system more, I realize now we're a blend of all of these types, even if you are one type per the system, right?
Uh-huh.
Because I learned these characteristics also through different energies in the chart, and there's so much more than just these types. And then I really came to the conclusion it's a mix. It's at some point this type stands out more and you feel it stronger, but there you may also experience other parts, right? And I cannot tell you what your experience is going to be. It's going to be unique. And this is also by actually human design is called an experiment. It kind of presents you like this is what it means to be a human, and we have these different parts. And it's important for us to integrate it. And when something is out of balance, because, like you're saying, we could fall with the relationship types. Yeah, we can fall into receiving too much, right? And never get into the giver role. Not a good thing. Or we can also fall into giving and giving and giving. I think moms oftentimes may experience that a lot, right? Where it's just like, it's too much. And then they have a very hard time because of self-worth. Nobody wants to receive anything and they push it away, right? So it's finding that balance and leaning into it. And sometimes you have an extreme, and then it's followed by another extreme. And then over time, you find your unique magic way of integrating all these archetypes, relationship types into your life. So this is why
Yes.
I really love this. It's
Once you can
flexible.
as you identify things, I think we love taking these tests, our astrology or our human design or our Myers-Briggs and things because, or the conscious home design workbook because it asks you to discover things. It draws things out of yourself. And you're like, oh, yes, I always knew that about myself, but it wasn't verbalized. It wasn't
Yeah,
crystallized or put into writing before. Now I can see that. It's like, oh, yes. And so, hey, I'm not weird. I'm exactly the way I'm supposed to be.
exactly. Yeah.
And now that I know that, I can lean into it. I can celebrate that and know that that's a right choice for me. And so, the relationships are really about um, finding that harmony and that joy in every day. Because look, on another level, I find that as life gets busy, um, and whether it's family obligations or work or whatever it is, seems like there's just not enough time in the day. And as life presses in on us and is more demanding of our energy and our time, some of the things that get cut out first are um, creative expression activities or personal development things. And if a person is caught in where they're working all the time, which is a form of giving, or they're parenting all the time, which is another form of giving, um, then and there's too much of that, then they're not being fed creative expression, whether it's just for yourself as a hobby, hey, I like to paint, or whether it's something that you're actually share with others, bring it to the marketplace or whatever, that's a personal decision. Even a hobby is a giving creative activity. But the fact that you can do it, what happens when people cut it off is they wake up 10 years later and they go, oh my God, I'm dying, I'm starving, I feel like I've been, I'm drowning, and they have a crisis moment. And so with conscious home design, I'm saying, look, let's ask what you do. And so, sure, if you tell me, I love to play the cello. And when I was, younger, before I started my family, I used to play an hour every single day and 2 hours on the weekend.
Mm.
And the truth is, you might not have time to do an hour of cello a day. But if the cello is living in a case, in a closet, or in your attic, and all you have is 10 minutes, you're not going to go and get it out and set it up and do it. But if you have a little alcove or a space dedicated to playing the cello, and then you can just take a couple steps into that space, sit down in the chair, and just play one song or do some scales to keep your fingers limber. And 10 minutes, and you may say, well, it won't always be this way. And I used to play for an hour, but every little step you take in the direction of your dreams, in an activity that feeds you is going to set up a positive feedback loop and serve you and let you know that, okay, and keep that spark alive. And so we need to do the things that feed us, whether they're personal activities, personal goals, or whether they're, relationships, a balance of relationship types.
Mm.
So conscious home design is about saying what things feed you on Elena. How can I help shape your space so that you have more chance to do those things. And that's because I believe that happy people are better neighbors. Fulfilled people make better citizens. We're worried about changing the world because the world's in chaos. The world is big. It's hard to change the world, but you can change yourself. And if a person is struggling and they're drowning, they're like, they're thinking about themselves because they've been neglected for so long. They don't have their quality relationships in place. They're stuck in a giving or too much receiving, one or the other,
Mm.
for example, or they're just not having creative expression time, and they're not feeding themselves, they're not growing, then they're going to be very frustrated. And a person in that mindset, they're probably not prioritizing being a good neighbor or buying organic food or shopping for eco-sensitive or less environmentally impactful choices in their life. They got bigger fish to fry. Hey, I'm just trying to survive here. But once people achieve a sense of safety and possibility, and like, oh, I'm doing okay, then they can start to think, how am I walking through life? Am I treading lightly and leaving goodness where I walk, and so people can be more sensitive. And so it's like Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. If you're starving to death, it doesn't do you much good to know that you're honored and loved and respected. You just need a sandwich. Please give
Yeah,
that person
yeah.
some food, right? There's levels, right? And so conscious home design is about satisfying these levels so that naturally, as a result of that, you just grow into a better citizen. So conscious home design is like think globally but act locally. It's like changing the world one family or one home at a time.
I
That's the
almost have
greater philosophy behind
almost have
it.
tears in my eyes. It's so beautiful because I can so relate to this as a coach. I have also this, it's almost a pressure in some way, or this desire where I want to help humanity on a collective level.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
then there's always this like, okay, I have to start with myself. If I'm deprived
Yeah.
of myself, like how I'm gonna help. And it is one step at a time, one person at a time, one home at a time. And as you embody this, as you show this, it inspires others, and then it creates this ripple effect over time. But it doesn't happen from like, I have to fix everything, I have to help everybody, but you're not actually helping or feeling content and happy about your own life. Um,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I find, so I have a meditation practice that helps me center and
Hmm.
tune into the flow, the rhythm of life, and feel like I'm connected, and when I can center myself, I feel like I show up more powerfully and more authentically
Hmm.
for others. Um, but it doesn't mean that my life has to be perfect or I have to have my act together in every way before I can help others. I mean, you imagine you can have a surgeon who may their personal life may be a disaster, and they might be an absolute wreck of a human being, but they could still save your life on the operating table. And so, you know,
Yeah, that's true too.
you and I have certain professional competencies that we can perform, even if things are rough at home, for example. You know what I mean? And so, yes, I understand. The more on we are, the more power we seem to bring into our exchanges, but it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect to be able to deliver real value to others. So,
But
um,
that's a
I
good
encourage forgiveness and
point too.
acceptance.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, I think it's again going back to the extreme, right? If I
Sure.
consistently like
Yeah.
neglect myself, I probably cannot make the impact I could make when I nurture myself. But I love because that's also a very important reminder for us. And it's true. Like I have sometimes
Yeah.
crappy days and I'm changing a person's life with a session and stuff.
That's right.
Because we
Yeah.
also have to learn to show up no matter how we feel, whatever is going on there. But that overall baseline and really focusing on having a fulfilling home environment. So for me,
Yes.
you're giving me permission to dream about the house that I want to have one day. For
Tell
me,
me. Tell
a
me about it.
kitchen. I mean, I love this. I actually see this big kitchen and has a big island. There's a nice big table where everybody can gather. And there is this huge window. And I guess I'm looking out into nature. There's a lot of light coming in. Because for me, food is, and you talked about the Maslow pyramid, right? Um,
Mhm.
what we eat. And I know for myself, when I don't eat well, when I kind of, because I can get very busy and sometimes forget to eat, and then I didn't do the food prepping, and then something really quick, damn, that impacts me so much.
That's right. The mind body connection.
Yeah,
It's
and
real.
then
Hmm.
I go back to the farmer's market. I'm in my happy element, and I have nice stuff in the fridge, and I make this nice meal, and I feel like a whole different person, seriously. So,
Yeah. And so this is an example of the mind body environment connection and how the environment can support what you need. If the kitchen is poorly designed,
yeah,
it's difficult to make food. The I've seen lovely, beautiful showcase kitchens that are like eye candy. You see them posted up on
yeah,
Instagram or Pinterest or in the design magazines. And I look at it and I think, wow, that's, they spent 100 grand just on the appliances, another 100 grand on cabinets and countertops, and then the labor and the design. It's like their kitchen's worth $400,000. And it's like a palace. It's like this temple to the kitchen. But then I look at it more closely. I'm like, good grief, it's literally 25 feet from the refrigerator to the sink. Try to make a sandwich in that kitchen. You open the door and you're getting out lettuce and mustard and tomatoes and bread and cheese and slices and you got to walk over to the sink to wash the tomato. The chances of dropping something on the floor and going back and it takes you twice as long because it's not very efficient and stuff. It's like, so that kitchen is beautiful to look at. But if you're trying to make 3 meals a day in a kitchen like that, especially if it's not just for yourself, but if you're trying to prepare meals for a family,
yeah.
it's difficult. It takes a lot of time and energy and work to do that. It's not a practical kitchen. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so kitchens can be more thoughtfully, more sensitively designed to actually help you. Because what happens if you're in a kitchen like that and you're tired, you're at the end of the day, it's been a busy day, and you're like, oh my God, I just do not want to go prepare a big meal in that kitchen, then you're going to simplify and cut out some ingredients, or you're just going to take out, hey, let me order out and bring some food. And so that's okay once in a while. But
Mhm.
if it starts becoming regular, then over time, your nutrition levels are going to go down and your diet is going to suffer, and
Yeah,
that potentially shortens life expectancy. And so having a well-designed kitchen that can support you creating regular nutritious meals is going to serve you very well over time. And so you mentioned a large window, with scenes of nature and the sunlight coming in, light coming in. You said
mhm.
specifically light.
Yeah,
And if the kitchen is in a dark corner somewhere, then it's not very welcoming. It doesn't encourage you to go in there and spend time, and it feels like a chore. You may love to
mhm.
cook, but it just feels like a chore because you're in this place that's just very utility, and there's nothing beauty or inspiring about it. You've suggested a place that actually feels aesthetically inviting and pleasing and welcoming. It draws you in. We're attracted to the light. Light is life. And so I like to put a kitchen in the southeast corner if possible because it gets morning sun into the east and south throughout the day. And it's bright. And you can grow some herbs in the windowsill, a little basil and a few things and have a sprouting station, and reminders to keep putting fresh things into our diet and not just eat everything out of a package.
Yeah.
And that so these ways, encourage you to spend a little bit more time in the kitchen to prepare, more nutritious food. And also, there's a little intention. When you put love into the food you're preparing, I believe that vibration changes the frequency of the food itself. And whether it's yourself or loved ones are partaking of that food, they're getting a little bit of that beyond the nutritional value and the flavor of the food. They're getting a little mojo. They're getting a little goodness that
I
you've
believe
that you've
that for
invested.
yeah. I
Hmm.
think I was reading yesterday somewhere that it's really the person that prepares the food that is often the most important because like the energy that goes into it, right?
I think it makes a difference. Yeah, the intention and how you show up. Preparing that food. And so if we can create a supportive space that it makes it easier for you to show up and feel, good in that space while you're doing what you need to do, then it's just a win-win all around.
Yeah, no, I love it so much. I have some questions about, so you have a certification, right? Where you
Yes.
also teach other people about the
Yes.
conscious home design concept. So is this only
Hmm.
for architects or is this also for coaches? I guess,
Yeah,
realtors? Like who is it for?
sure. Thanks for asking. I'd like to help the whole world, because conscious home design is a universal thing, like human design. It can help anyone, no matter where they live and what their background is. Just understanding more about it, understanding more about the mind-body environment connection is like an essential life skill, just like knowing how to prepare a well-balanced meal or knowing how to dress for the weather. But I'm just me. I can't help the whole world, and so the best thing I can do is teach others about the conscious home design methodology so they can work with their people. And so there's two levels. There's level one certification as an ambassador, there's level two certification as a practitioner. And so level two is for architects and designers who are actually generating floor plans for people. Level one are for people who are just want to help people live their best life. And so whether they're a real estate agent trying to help them assess if a house they're looking to buy is going to fit
Hmm.
for them beyond just has the right amount of bedrooms and is a style they like, but is it actually going to flow for what they want to do?
Hmm.
Um, and for life coaches, people that help people with their body, mind, spirit, and they just want to integrate, more fully, because
Hmm.
you can be helping someone trying to change their life or establish new positive habits. But if their environment is not conducive to that, they're swimming stream against the current.
Yeah, yeah.
And so understanding the ways that you can help your client um, create a supportive environment that will reinforce the new qualities they're trying to grow within themselves is very powerful. And so level one certification is perfect for those types of people. And so I'm happy to talk with that about anyone if they're interested. They can go to conscioushomedesign.com and send me a message. And or if someone actually just wants to have, they're working on a home project, they're upsizing, they need more space, or they're downsizing, kids have grown and gone, and why do they need to maintain all those bedrooms for just, you, me, and the dog? And they want to downsize into a really beautiful quality space. Um, I work on projects all over the country, top to bottom, coast to coast. So
Mm.
um, a great place to start is just at my website, and they can choose their own adventure, whether they want
Yeah.
the book or they want to get certified or they want to pick my brain and to have a private consultation. It's all
Mhm.
available.
Yeah, I love it. So one more question I have for you is obviously you can get the most out of this when you completely build a home from scratch, right? You have a
That's
piece
right.
of
Yeah.
land. Now, how is
It's a
it when,
quantum leap
yeah,
in taking care of your future if you build it from scratch. But
yeah.
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I Go ahead.
Um, because that would be my dream. Like, okay, I want to buy a piece of land and then build it from scratch the way I like it. But there's also situations where you have a home and maybe you can change something within it or apply those
Yeah,
concepts with the existing structure you have. Or, I mean,
that's
sometimes,
right.
I mean, where I live right now is an apartment complex. I can't really change anything to the structure. I'm very lucky that I actually have a kitchen
Yes.
window where the sun is rising in the morning. And that's my favorite
Nice.
part of my whole place.
Uh-huh.
But there are certain limitations sometimes we have to work with, right? And it's like, oh,
That's
this is
right.
the home I have. So is this also applicable and helps you to kind of rearrange within those
Yeah.
existing
Yeah.
structures?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And we almost could have opened the whole conversation with this question because the truth is, Annalena, you can make a quantum leap into creating your future when you're able to shape a brand new home from scratch just the way you want it. You can really set yourself up for massive success. But most people in life will never hire an architect. Most people
Yeah.
will do the best they can with the walls they have.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote the book Conscious Home Design, I was very I was aware of that, and part of my desire as an architect in a service based profession is to add value to anyone I come into contact with,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so the principles of conscious home design, luckily, can be applied by someone even living in a rental apartment. They have, you might not even, some people's lease agreements, they might not even be allowed to repaint. All they can
Mm.
do is arrange their furniture and their
Yeah.
decorations, and that's the extent that they have power to influence their environment. The good news is is that cultivating relationships can be done there. That's the biggest impactor, and it's the low hanging fruit. It can be done no
Mhm.
matter where you are, no matter what space you're living in. And so, there are systems and the way you organize your space. Do you have an alcove set up for meditation or centering or journaling or personal development
Yeah, that's
work
something
or creative
I'm
activity?
missing. Yeah, I would like to.
Is there a way that you can somehow partition it off with one of those with a beautiful screen, to create a little bit of separation, because if it's the open concept plan works for some spaces want connection, but some want separation,
Yeah.
and I really support compartmentalizing where feasible, because when a space is dedicated exclusively to a certain activity, then just stepping in there helps get you in the zone, get you in flow for doing that activity, and whereas if I'm trying to, if I set down in my living room, which generates conversation consciousness, and I'm trying to write and journal, maybe it's harder for me to focus. Whereas
Mm.
if I go into my study, I might be able to focus on my work more easily without the distractions of like going into the kitchen. You might generate hunger conscious. Your mouth could start to salivate just because you went into that room. There's like almost a Pavlovian association. Or you might yawn going into the bedroom, and so that's not a good place to work.
Yeah, that's
And so
okay.
having
That's true.
having dedicated spaces for certain activities is the ideal,
Mm.
but even just starting to compartmentalize and dedicate little zones, even if it's just an alcove or a corner, you set up a screen or a curtain and be like, this is my meditation space. Then you start to create energetic separations between activities. So
Mm.
the relationships, we didn't talk about examples. We talked about the specific um, giving, receiving, reciprocal relationships and different types of ways that we experience those or get those, engage in those. But what does it actually look like in the home? And so um, I challenged myself um, to say, not only is it possible, what would it look like to have a home designed where we have opportunities for all three relationships there. Because you may think naturally, hey, the kitchen, that's where I'm preparing food. It's more of a giving space, In the family room, that's where I'm interacting, telling stories, and that's more of a reciprocal space, And so some certain rooms in the house seem to lend themselves more naturally to different relationships. But I challenged myself and said, is it possible to not only just have opportunity for all three kinds in the home, but to have opportunity for all three kinds of relationship, giving, receiving, and reciprocal in every single room in the home? What would
Mm.
that look like? And so this is really where the rubber meets the road, and where we're taking this big theory, this big idea, and this 10,000-foot overview, and the plane's coming into land and touchdown, and we're getting into the nitty-gritty specifics of what people can do.
Mm.
So to to meet this challenge, I started with a room that people typically do not think of as a relationship cultivating space, and that's the bathroom. The
Mhm.
bathroom is largely a private space. It's where we go to take care of the body and just do our business. It's a place where we may go to just shut the door to be alone, if we need a break from things.
Mhm.
And that's true. The bathroom definitely is a personal space, but it's also at the same time an extremely rich opportunity for us to strengthen our sense of connection. And so, examples of giving relationship in the bathroom are, you know, certainly if there's a window, get a couple of plants in there, put them on the windowsill or hang them from the top, or get a little plant stand nearby that they can sit on. And then not only are you cultivating the giving relationship, but there's also a physiological benefit. When we see green growing things, we step more easily into the parasympathetic nervous system. Something tells us because the body didn't evolve in buildings.
Yeah.
Humans evolved in nature. And
Mhm.
so when we see nature, it sends a subconscious cue to us instinctually, hey, you're in your natural element. You can relax. No matter how beautiful your home is, and no matter how much more peaceful your sanctuary is compared to the chaos of the outside world, it's still an unnatural environment. And so putting plants in your home makes it even that much more um, relaxing. to be in. You get a sense of peace. And so plants. Taking it one step further, what about having a little goldfish bowl in there?
Mhm.
And then you come in and there's life, instead of just a dead
Mhm.
utility space. And you can, sprinkle a little food, hi fish, and now there's a spark of joy in there. And you've taken a step into making your bathroom like an oasis rather than just a utility. Look, if you don't have an outside window, then put in a full spectrum light bulb. Not a daylight bulb; those are a little
Mhm.
glaring, but you can get a full spectrum bulb, and many plants do just fine with
Mm.
that.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah.
So reciprocal relationships in the bathroom, we see this happen in master bathrooms a lot where there's two sinks. You can brush your teeth side by side with
Mhm.
somebody.
Mhm.
Um, or if it's your lifestyle, if you desire it, how about a big tub, a soaking tub big enough for two
Mhm.
people?
Mhm.
Or, it's very romantic and also very relaxing too for the body to soak. But for efficiency's sake, what about a shower that's big enough with two heads so you don't have to take
Mhm.
turns and schedule your bathroom time? You can just do it simultaneously. It doesn't have to be sexy time. It can just be about getting the day done. And studies show that when we're going about our business in proximity with others, you don't even have to talk sometimes, but it creates a sense of security and stability and familiarity that's very encouraging and very reassuring to us.
Right, right.
So these are just options. If you choose, if your lifestyle, if you want it, people have to do what feels right for them. But those are examples of reciprocal relationships, even in a bathroom.
Mm.
And so receiving relationships, you can take an image of someone that inspires you or someone that loves you and have them somewhere there where maybe when you're brushing your teeth, you can glance at it and remember, hey, you know what? I am loved. I am encouraged. Someone wants the best for me. And if it feels too prominent to have a picture of grandma, in there, or you're like, hey, I'm Catholic and my partner is Jewish, and we both don't agree to have a picture of Jesus, in the bathroom, then just take a quote. Take a quote,
Mm.
an inspirational quote that inspires you from somewhere, or something that someone wrote to you in a letter or in a message, and then write that out and put that on the mirror. So it's very subtle. It doesn't have to be very in your face, but you can just look at that and almost like an affirmation, just take 5 seconds to
Yeah.
remember that feeling of being loved.
Mm.
And how does that show up into your day, the ripple effects? So
Yeah.
those are examples of receiving relationships. And once you do that, you can take that through every room in the house.
Yeah, and it's really inspiring how you take just the usually, oh, it's just the bathroom. We don't think much about it, but how we can actually make it so much more enriching. Thank you so much, Taylor. This was really inspiring, really wonderful. I feel like we could go on because I want to now know about every room, but I recommend also everyone to check out your book. I make sure I will share this in the show notes and your certification program. Yeah, thank you so much for all your wisdom. It's very, very fresh new perspectives about, yeah, really improving the quality of living in our homes. Well, like you said, that's where we spend so much time at.
Thanks for having me. Really great to talk with you and share some of these insights and learn a little bit more about your approach through human design.
Yeah, you see, there are lots of similarities. And you listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you loved this conversation as much as I did. And I'm excited to be back with you all on the next episode. Ciao, everyone.